Today we're going to tie the Russia steelhead nymph. As the name suggests, this is a steelhead fly, but I found another use for it. This is my go-to fly on the C&O Canal when I'm sight fishing for carp in Washington, D.C. The reason why I like this fly so much is the water is very murky in the canal, and you really don't have typically more than a foot or two of visibility when it comes to actually seeing the fly. You can usually see the fish a little deeper, but the flies disappear out of sight very fast. This fly is very bright, still has all the right proportions for a nymph that the fish are going to be feeding on, and it has a low sink rate. So with the visibility, it lets you end up getting that fly in the zone where the fish is going to see it, where it's going to key on it and go after it. And it gives you a much better chance of being able to actually see the fish eat the fly rather than having to assume when it's eating it and try to read its body language. Significantly increases the number of hookups, ends up being a much better fly. So for materials, first up is the hook. I'm using a Daichi 1560. It's a wet fly / nymph hook. It's 1x strong, 1x long. I like using the extra strong hooks because the carp can get kind of big and they can pull pretty hard, and you don't want to deal with any bent hooks. For the tail, we use some standard goose biots. For the body, I tie these in chartreuse, ultra chenille. For the wing casing, just get some flat diamond braid. I use black, it should have a little bit of sparkle in it. Thorax, we're going to use some chartreuse estaz. Alright, we're going to tie the thread base. Just use a black thread. Not something too big, just probably whatever you use to tie up your standard trout nymph. I usually don't cover the entire shank of the hook with a thread base. I don't really find it to be that necessary on these flies. The worst part about this fly is the tail, in my opinion. Got to get in there, grab 2 of those goose biots. You want them basically one next to the other just so that they're closest to the same length and same proportions. So here's the tricky part. We're going to splay these goose biots. So you can see, hopefully, that they have a little bit of a curve to the end. You got to get it so that the curves are back to back so they end up going apart from one another. This can be pretty tricky. It usually takes me a couple tries. Luckily I got that one pretty easily. I got to line the tips up, but you can see how they're still splayed out, right? That's what you're looking for. You're going to use that in more flies than just this one. Okay, so once you've got it in that position, lay it over the hook shank and make sure that each piece of that tail goes on one side of the hook shank. So once you've got it there, give it a couple wraps. Don't crank down too hard yet, but you want to give it enough to keep it in place. And once you've got a few wraps in there, give it a nice squeeze. You might have to adjust the tail a little bit once it's in, but that's no big deal. Make sure it's nice and secured. You probably can't see too well how they're splayed right now, but if I turn it a little for you, you should be able to see the nice fork that's in that tail. So that's what you're looking for. So next we got to tie in the body. So move your thread back to the bend of the shank, the bend of the hook. Grab your ultra chenille. Tie it in. I usually leave on all the extras. I like having that extra body to the fly. I feel like that helps it sink a little slower. Go ahead and make your wraps. Usually on this fly, at least on a size 10, it's usually anywhere from, I'd say either 3 or 4 is what I typically do. If you're using some really thin chenille, then you can probably get away with a 5th. But usually I find I run out of space when I start trying to get five wraps in there. Alright, so tie that on. Now you'll notice I'm being a little slow because what I do is I'm cheap. I don't cut the material off until it's at the very end, so I have almost no waste. lets me save, you know, that 1/10 of a penny on material there every time I tie. So next we're going to tie in the wing casing. So this is the that diamond braid. Get it right on there. Stuff can be a little bit of pain to work with sometimes just because it's got so many different pieces to it. Can a lot of times start getting loose on you, so just make sure you got it nice and secured in there. I'm having trouble getting a couple of the fibers. Once that's in there, grab your estaz, lay that over, tie it on, secure it down, move your thread forward. Now for the wraps here, to make your thorax, this stuff doesn't wrap particularly well in my opinion, but that's okay. I only use a couple turns. Its fibers are so out there, it creates plenty of body with just 2 turns. There's no need to keep adding turn after turn after turn of material here. Alright, so secure it down. You'll see I'm fighting with it again just because trying to save that material there. Give it the little snip. Now for the rest of the fly, every time I do anything, I always try to smooth back the fibers from that estaz, just because I want to try to avoid them pointing forward as much as possible. Now these are carp, they're smart fish, but honestly, I don't think that that's going to really deter them. They're not as picky as trout can be most of the time. So I don't worry too much about having it look absolutely perfect with no stray fibers going around. So pull your wing casing forward, and we're going to tie it off here right at the base of the head. Give yourself a couple wraps there. Snip. And just make sure it's completely secured down. And there you go, that's your fly. Now you just got to finish it off. So I usually do a half hitch or 2 and then a whip finish. I just knocked the camera there, sorry about that. Get your whip finish in there. Secure, pull tight. Cut your thread. And then finish it off with some head cement. I find that this fly is actually pretty durable. I typically don't really find it falling apart. So it should last you plenty long. I usually end up breaking it off, either getting wrapped up or getting caught on a tree or something like that before it falls apart. If you want, just to be sure, because that wing casing usually is the first thing that can get all messed up, just put a dab of the head cement on the wing casing, and that should keep it nice and secure. So there we go. That's your Russian steelhead nymph.